Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to MST.TV. This is Nishi here, bringing you all another Market Watch episode. So over the past few years, we've been getting a lot of support for older archetypes, right? Decks like Shaddoll's, Burning Abyss, and Firefist, all different decks that were popular many years ago and have gotten support recently in order to try and make archetypes competitive again. At the same time, sometimes cards that were previously banned or limited get moved up to either limited or unlimited status, giving decks a bit of a bump up in terms of power. Now in either case, the boost to these archetypes often results in a bump up in price for key cards that are either in higher rarities and more expensive, or have limited printings available from each of these archetypes. So in today's episode, we're going to take a look at cards from a number of different archetypes that players are going to be looking at as being more viable either now or in a few months, and some of the price movements that have come as a result. Let's get started. So first up, let's take a look at Dark Lords. So Dark Lords just had their Link Monster Condemned Dark Lord imported to the TCG in Dual Overload. However, they also have a number of new support cards confirmed to be coming out in Rise of the Duelist, the set after Eternity Code. Now, none of this is to suggest that Dark Lords are going to be meta, because honestly the support just isn't really that great. However, the artwork on like every single Dark Lord card is really beautiful, and it's a deck that's really popular with a lot of the player base, so the deck is seeing some hype. Dark Lord Morningstar is one of the boss monsters of the archetype, and while it didn't see much play before, it's basically required now because the new Dark Lord fusion requires you to use Morningstar as a fusion material in order to get its full effect. As it only has one printing from the original Destiny Soldiers set, it is now all the way up at $12 a piece, whereas it was only $1 or so before. Yugioh has also jumped up in price, one of the key cards from the archetype, as it's basically a destiny draw, allowing you to discard herself and another Dark Lord card in order to draw 2 cards. It can also help to get key cards like Superbia into the graveyard, so that you can revive them after with Dark Lord Contact. Now this card has 2 printings. Its original Destiny Soldiers print is now up at $15 a piece, and its Battles of Legend reprint is around $7, which is still a significant jump from the $3 to $5 it was sitting at before. Finally, Dark Lord Rebellion is a very simple trap card. It's basically just a Raigeki break, but it's specific for Dark Lords, important because its effect can be copied by your Dark Lord monsters while the trap is in the graveyard. It's one of the few points of interaction that the deck has during your opponent's turn, so it's very necessary. As I mentioned before, I don't think that the Dark Lord deck is very good, even with all of this new support, and most of the cards were fairly cheap before anyways, so the idea here should be just to dig them out of your bulk and sell them for as much value as you can before they get reprinted. Now, another archetype getting support in Rise of the Duelist is Fluffles, which get the ability to fuse from your hand during your opponent's turn, as well as a couple of other cute tricks. Now, I'm not going to pretend that I'm an expert on Fluffles or anything. I've actually never even really played the deck before, but from what I've seen, it makes the deck fairly decent and gives the deck some going first options, which it has always kind of lacked. Now surprisingly, we haven't seen too many buyouts of Fluffle cards quite yet, as a lot of the stuff from the archetype is fairly cheap. However, there are a couple of cards we're going to want to keep an eye on moving forward, as they haven't yet been reprinted. Fright for Kraken is the most notable. This card has actually jumped from being $5 to $9 all the way up to $26, which is pretty ridiculous. I don't know how necessary this card is in the deck, but I think it is played at 1 or 2 from what I've seen. It is also one of the very few expensive pieces left in the deck. Fright for Reborn is another card that I would keep an eye on. Now, it's not a great card. I don't think it's actually played in the deck at all, but it has seen some attention in the past. It's only around $8 a piece right now, but it's support for the archetype, and it came from a side set that wasn't open very much, and it only has the 1 printing, so I think it is fairly vulnerable to a buyout, so it is something to keep an eye on. I would have your copies ready to list as soon as possible for when someone does try to hype them up and buy them out. And lastly, this is a smaller card that I think people won't have paid as much attention to, but Fluffle Wings is a really important card in the Fluffle deck, providing draw power that the deck otherwise lacks. However, it only has 1 printing ever as a common from Dimensions of Chaos, which is a few years old by now. Unless it gets reprinted soon, I'm expecting it to become a $5 common very shortly, so if you can grab your commons for around $1 or 2 a piece now, I would do that sooner rather than later if you're looking to play the Fluffle deck. Next up, let's take a look at artifacts. So there are a number of different factors that have caused the artifact engine to jump up in price. First, Artifact Sanctum is confirmed to get a reprint in Battles of Legend later this year. Often, seeing one part of an engine get reprinted will cause the other pieces to go up in value, since more people will want to make use of those cards. Secondly, Artifact Dagda got imported in Dual Overload, which gives a lot of decks the ability to set Scythe on the board consistently, which can then be popped to stun your opponent during their turn. And finally, the Eldritch archetype features trap monsters that are level 5 light monsters, and they are a very trap heavy deck. Naturally, the artifacts could fit very well alongside them, providing additional disruption and granting the ability to make rank 5 Xyz monsters like Pleiades quite consistently. Now, all of that being said, Artifact Durandal is the big winner here, as not only is the Ultimate Rare now an $18 to $20 card, but even both versions of the Ultra Rare are all the way up at $11 a piece. Artifact Ignition is something that has seen a little bit of attention for the last little while, ever since Dagda came out, still at around $8 each a piece. And finally, worth noting here is that Artifact Scythe is starting to creep up in price despite its many printings. It's currently about $1, up from the 50 cents or so it was before, but I think there's a very reasonable chance that it could be worth $3 to $5 very soon, depending on how much play the Artifact engine sees in the future. Now that the Sanctum reprint is confirmed for Battles of Legend, I'm hoping that Durandal and Ignition will get reprinted there as well, as they're not really key components of the Artifact engine. If not, then I would grab your Scythes now, as they are an essential part of the engine, but drop your extra copies of Durandal and Ignition as soon as you can. Now let's take a look at Blackwing. So for those of you who didn't see it, Tombox actually showcased his Blackwing deck profile earlier, where he used the deck to set up an infinite negate loop with Mist Valley's Apex Avion and Thunderbird. Now that Lunalight Tiger is banned, it just might be the case that Blackwings are actually the best deck to try and pull off that loop. At the very least, they are a very interesting combo deck, and they're very popular with a lot of players as an old deck, so we've seen a number of pieces of the deck get bought out. Ultimate Rare Blackwing Rakiri the Rain Shower was bought out and is now a $16 card. However, I think that this one was kind of silly. If you look online, you can still buy Ultra Rares for only $1 or so, so rather than being an essential card, this was just likely someone trying to capitalize off of the hype around the archetype and buying out the max rarity version of one of the cards. Now on the other hand, we have Simoon the Poison Wind, an actually key card for Blackwings as it helps to search for Black Whirlwind. Now this card does only have one printing, and it's from Legendary Duelist White Dragon Abyss, a set that wasn't really heavily opened. However, it is now quite an old set, so it is due for a reprint sometime soon. It is currently a $20 super rare. And then finally, Caligo Clawcrow is an extender that Tombox showed off in his deck profile that is now a $7 card. It was only available in a starter deck that came out like 6 or 7 years ago or something, so it is quite hard to find. Most people probably overlook it when they're going through their bulk or something. It is a cute card that is also a winged beast monster, and you can summon it as long as you control a dark monster, so it's a very free, easy extender to take advantage of. Now there are a couple of other things that have been bought out and are pretty expensive. For example, Chris the Crack of Dawn, a $20 gold rare with only one printing, and ultra rare Bora the Spear, the highest rarity version available from Legendary Collection 5Ds. Basically, if you have any extra Blackwing stuff lying around that's hollow, check out what it's worth because there's a decent chance that it has jumped up in price. Next up, let's take a look at Mer Males. So personally, I think that Mer Males are a very scary deck right now and should definitely be at the back of everyone's mind when thinking about competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! The deck gets access to a third copy of Deep Sea Diva, basically giving it 6 copies of Nept Abyss, a key card that kickstarts the entire deck. Mer Males are also a really solid option going first or second. Going first, they can rip your opponent's hand with Mulan Glacia and set up cards like Totally Awesome, or going second, they can OTK you out of nowhere, popping your cards with the Atlanteans and putting out huge damage with Abyss Megalo. I think that people are starting to take note of Mer Males, and they're really low-key seeing a bunch of buyouts across the board. Atlantean Dragoons, one of the more notable Astral Pack Ultimate Rares that has historically been quite expensive, is now a $140 Ultimate Rare. However, even the super rares from the starter deck are currently $10 a piece, as it's an absolutely key card in the deck at 3. Abyss Gaios is a card that a lot of people have probably forgotten about in favor of cards like Dracosac and Big Eye, but it's a really decent card when you're going first, allowing you to one-time blanket negate your opponent's entire field as long as their monsters have less than 2,800 attack points, which can be really helpful. Now it only has one printing, and as a result it is quite expensive, with the ultra rare being $18 and the ultimate rare right behind it at $20. Finally guys, Deep Sea Diva is the card that actually came off the ban list, and we're seeing the 2 holo versions of this card jump up in price quite significantly. The super rares from Turbo Pack are about $100 a piece right now, which is kind of insane. Even the Duelist Saga Ultra Rares, which aren't especially old, are around $7 to $8 a piece, which is a significant price jump for a card that was previously only $1 or so. So yeah, if you're wanting to build Mer Males, there are a couple of quite expensive pieces that you're going to have to pick up, so you might be better off waiting and hoping that they get reprinted in something like the Battles of Legends set later this year. Speaking of banlist returns, Zodiac Trident is a card that went from Forbidden to Limited, and with it a lot of people are looking at Zodiacs as a really solid engine. They can pretty easily make Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops, something with a very Cliffort Towers-like immunity built in. Now my friend Phil is actually really big on this deck. He's been trying out Zoo in everything, Zodiac Mech Knight, Zodiac Pendulums, you name it. To be fair, he didn't play in Zodiac format, so he didn't have to deal with how annoying it was to play against that deck either. Anyways, there are a lot of people interested by the strategy, so I guess it's kind of cool, like a hipster choice nowadays. Megaclops, being the card that the Zoo engine wants to go into, is now a $9 card, as it actually has been for some time since the first time that we saw Zodiac's top before Trident get unbanned. It did kind of bounce back up before settling back down again, so this is just in case you guys kind of missed it. Ultimate Rare Whiptails are now also $27 a piece, which is again still down from the $40 it was not too long ago, but way up from the $10 to $12 that they were for the longest time. And finally, Chakanine is notably now a $9 card, whereas it was only $2 to $4 before, as to this day it still hasn't been reprinted. Now, if you're playing Zodiacs, it is a very important card because it allows you to bring back a Zodiac Xyz monster that you can use to make Megaclops with. However, it doesn't have a reprint, so it could see one very soon later this year if Zodiacs do continue to see some sort of play. So yeah, after living through Zodiac format, I never thought I'd see the day where Zodiacs were like a cool casual player's choice, but that day has finally arrived. And finally, the last archetype we're going to talk about is Orcas. So I'm sure we all know by now, but Mech Orcas Girsu is going to be coming out in Eternity Code, and there's a chance that it could make Orcas relevant once again. Now Harp Horror is still banned, but the deck can still do what it did before, just not as easily. Now fortunately, Orcas are a fairly budget deck, with Galatea only being a 50-cent super rare, and Dingirsu getting a reprint in Dual Overload. The one expensive piece that still hasn't been reprinted is Orchestrated Return. It is all the way up at $27 a piece. Now I personally thought it was going to be reprinted in Dual Overload, given that we have Eternity Code coming out soon, but I guess we have to wait until Battles of Legend or something to see it. Now also, Galatea and Dingirsu are fairly cheap, but the ultimate rare versions of these cards are not. Ultimate Rare Galatea, one of the most important cards in the deck that is typically run at 2 or 3, is basically a $50 Ultimate Rare, up from the $20 it was before, while Dingirsu, one of the most annoying cards to get over and a key component of the deck, is a $35 Ultimate Rare. While it looked like for a while that these cards were going to tank in price after the initial Harp Horror hit, the prices have started to rebound, so if you're looking to play the Orcas deck after Eternity Code drops, you might just be better off sticking with the lower rarities. Alright guys, so that is it for today's episode. With all of the legacy support coming out nowadays, it is always really interesting to see what old cards are going to potentially be relevant and part of the meta once again. It's one of the reasons I love Yu-Gi-Oh so much, especially compared to games like Pokemon or Magic, because without rotation, you never know when an old card or archetype might become useful again, so it's always great to hold on to all of your old cards. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy this video, please be sure to hit that thumbs up button for me, and as well, please leave a comment down below. Let me know what's going on with the market that maybe I didn't cover it in this video, so I can potentially cover it in a future video as well. And as always, if you guys haven't already, please consider subscribing to Tombox and myself, where we bring you all of the latest Yu-Gi-Oh content here on the channel. And yeah, so until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.